Perrin watched the mountains of Kinslayer's Dagger uncomfortably as he rode. The way still slanted upwards and looked as if it would climb forever, though he thought the crest of the pass must not be too much further. To one side of the trail, the land sloped sharply down to a shallow mountain stream, dashing itself to froth over sharp rocks. To the other side, the mountains reared in a series of jagged cliffs, like frozen stone waterfalls. The trail itself ran through fields of boulders, some the size of a man's head, and some as big as a cart. It would take no great skill to hide in that. The wolves said there were people in the mountains. Perrin wondered if they were some of Fain's dark friends. The wolves did not know or care. They only knew the twisted ones were somewhere ahead. Still far ahead, though Ingtar had pressed the column hard. Perrin noticed that Uno was watching the mountains around them, much the way he himself was. Matt, his bow slung across his back, rode with seeming unconcern, juggling 3 coloured balls, yet he looked paler than he had. Verin examined him 2 and 3 times a day now, frowning, and Perrin was sure she had even tried healing at least once, but it made no difference, Perrin could see. In any case, she seemed to be more absorbed in something about which she did not speak. Rand, Perrin thought, looking at the Aes Sedai's back. She always rode at the head of the column with Ingtar, and she always wanted them to move even faster than the Shienaran Lord would allow. Somehow she knows about Rand. Images from the wolves flickered in his head, stone farmhouses and terraced villages, all beyond the mountain peaks. The wolves saw them no differently than they saw hills or meadows, except with the feeling that they were spoiled land. For a moment he found himself sharing that regret, remembering places the 2 legs had long since abandoned, remembering the swift rush through the trees and the hamstringing snap of his jaws as the deer tried to flee, and, yeah, with an effort he pushed the wolves out of his head. These Aes Sedai are going to destroy all of us. Ingtar let his horse fall back beside Perrin's. Sometimes, to Perrin's eyes, the crescent crest on the Shienaran's helmet looked like a Trolloc's horns. Ingtar said softly, "Tell me again what the wolf said." "I've told you 10 times, Perrin muttered. "Tell me again. Anything I may have missed, anything that will help me find the horn." Yeah. Ingtar drew a breath and let it out slowly. "I must find the Horn of Valere, Perrin. Tell me again." There was no need for Perrin to order it in his mind, not after so many repetitions. He droned it out. "Someone or something attacked the Dart Friends in the night and killed those Trollocs we found." His stomach no longer lurched at that. Ravens and vultures were messy feeders. The wolves call him or it Shadowkiller. I think it was a man, but they wouldn't go close enough to see clearly. They are not afraid of the Shadowkiller, or is more like it. They say the Trollocs now follow Shadowkiller. And they say Fain is with them. Even after so long, the remembered smell of Fain, the feel of the man, made his mouth twist, so the rest of the Dark Friends must be too. "Shadowkiller," Ingtar murmured. "Something of the Dark One, like a Murdrail. I have seen things in the Blight that might be called Shadowkillers, but yeah. Did they see nothing else? They would not come close to him. It was not a Fade. I've told you, they will kill a Fade quicker than they will a Trolloc, even if they lose half the pack. Ingtar, the wolves who saw it, passed this to others, then still others before it reached me. I can only tell you what they passed on, and after so many tellings. Yeah. He let the words die as Uno joined them. "Aielman in the rocks," the one-eyed man said quietly. "This far from the waste?" Ingtar said incredulously. Uno somehow managed to look offended without changing his expression, and Ingtar added, "No, I don't doubt you. I am just surprised. He, Flaming, wanted me to see him, or I likely wouldn't have." Uno sounded disgusted at admitting it, and his bloody face wasn't veiled, so he's not out for killing. But when you see one bloody Aiel, there's always more you don't. Suddenly his eye widened. "Burn me if it doesn't look like he bloody wants more than to be seen." He pointed. A man had stepped into the way ahead of them. Instantly Masema's lance dropped to a couch, and he dug his heels into his horse, leaping to a dead gallop in 3 strides. He was not the only one. 4 steel points hurtled toward the man on the ground. "Hold!" Ingtar shouted. "Hold," I said. "I'll have the ears of any man who doesn't stop where he stands." Masema pulled in his horse viciously, sawing the reins. The others also stopped. In a cloud of dust, not 10 paces from the man, their lances still held steady on the man's chest. He raised a hand to wave away the dust as it drifted toward him. It was the first move he had made. He was a tall man, with skin dark from the sun and red hair cut short except for a tail in the back that hung to his shoulders. From his soft, laced, knee-high boots to the cloth wrapped loosely around his neck, his clothes were all in shades of brown and grey that would blend into rock or earth. The end of a short horn bow peeked over his shoulder, and a quiver bristled with arrows at his belt at one side. A long knife hung at the other. In his left hand he gripped a round hide buckler and 3 short spears, no more than half as long as he was tall, with points fully as long as those of the Shienaran lances. "I have no pipers to play the tune," the man announced with a smile, "but if you wish the dance—" Yeah. He did not change his stance, but Perrin caught a sudden air of readiness. "My name is Urien, of the Two Spires Sept of the Reign Aiel. I am a Red Shield. Remember me." Ingtar dismounted and walked forward, removing his helmet. Perrin hesitated only a moment before climbing down to join him. He could not miss the chance to see an Aiel close up, acting like a black-veiled Aiel. In story after story, Aiel were as deadly and dangerous as Trollocs. Some even said they were all dark friends, but Urien's smile somehow did not look dangerous, despite the fact that he seemed poised to leap. His eyes were blue. "He looks like Rand." Perrin looked around to see that Matt had joined them too. "Maybe Ingtar's right," Matt added quietly. "Maybe Rand is an Aiel." Perrin nodded. "But it doesn't change anything." "No, it doesn't." Matt sounded as if he were talking about something beside what Perrin meant. "We are both far from our homes," Ingtar said to the Aiel, "and we at least have come for other things than fighting." Perrin revised his opinion of Urien's smile. The man actually looked disappointed. "As you wish it, Shienaran." Urien turned to Verin, just getting down off her horse, and made an odd bow, digging the points of his spears into the ground and extending his right hand, palm up. His voice became respectful. "Wise one, my water is yours." Verin handed her reins to one of the soldiers. She studied the Aiel as she came closer. "Why do you call me that? Do you take me for an Aiel?" "No, wise one. But you have the look of those who have made the journey to Rhuidean and survived. The years do not touch the wise ones in the same way as other women, or as they touch men." An excited look appeared on the Aes Sedai's face, but Ingtar spoke impatiently. "We are following Dark Friends and Trollocs, Urien. Have you seen any sign of them?" "Trollocs? Here?" Urien's eyes brightened. "It is one of the signs the prophecies speak of. When the Trollocs come out of the Blight again, we will leave the threefold land and take back our places of old." There was muttering from the mounted Shienarans. Urien eyed them with a pride that made him seem to be looking down from a height. "The threefold land?" Matt said. Perrin thought he looked still paler, not sick exactly, but as if he had been out of the sun too long. "You call it the Waste," Urien said. "To us it is the threefold land. A shaping stone to make us, a testing ground to prove our worth, and a punishment for the sin." "What sin?" Matt asked. Perrin caught his breath, waiting for the spears in Urien's hand to flash. The Aiel shrugged. "So long ago it was that none remember, except the wise ones and the clan chiefs, and they will not speak of it. It must have been a very great sin if they cannot bring themselves to tell us, but the Creator punishes us well." "Trollocs," Ingtar persisted. "Have you seen Trollocs?" Urien shook his head. "I would have killed them if I had, but I have seen nothing but the rocks and the sky." Ingtar shook his head, losing interest, but Verin spoke, sharp concentration in her voice. "This, Rhuidean. What is it? Where is it? How are the girls chosen to go?" Urien's face went flat, his eyes hooded. "I cannot speak of it, wise one." In spite of himself, Perrin's hand gripped his axe. There was that in Urien's voice. Ingtar had also set himself, ready to reach for his sword, and there was a stir among the mounted men. But Verin stepped up to the Aiel until she was almost touching his chest and looked up into his face. "I am not a wise one as you know them, Urien," she said insistently. "I am Aes Sedai. Tell me what you can say of Rhuidean." The man who had been ready to face 20 men now looked as if he wished for an escape from this one plump woman with greying hair. Yeah, can tell you only what is known to all. Rhuidean lies in the lands of the Gen Aiel, the 13th clan. I cannot speak of them except to name them. None may go there save women who wish to become wise ones, or men who wish to be clan chiefs. Perhaps the Gen Aiel choose among them, I do not know. Many go, few return, and those are marked as what they are, wise ones or clan chiefs. No more can I say, Aes Sedai. No more. Verin continued to look up at him, pursing her lips. Urien looked at the sky as though he was trying to remember it. Will you slay me now, Aes Sedai? She blinked. What? Will you slay me now? One of the old prophecies says that if ever we fail the Aes Sedai again, they will slay us. I know your power is greater than that of the wise ones. The Aiel laughed suddenly, mirthlessly. There was a wild light in his eyes. Bring your lightnings, Aes Sedai. I will dance with them. The Aiel thought he was going to die, and he was not afraid. Perrin realized his mouth was open and closed it with a snap. What would I not give, Verin murmured, gazing up at Urien, to have you in the White Tower, or just willing to talk? Oh, be still, man. I won't harm you, unless you mean to harm me with your talk of dancing. Urien seemed astounded. He looked at the Shienarans, sitting their horses all around, as if he suspected some trick. You are not a maiden of the spear, he said slowly. How could I strike at a woman who has not wedded the spear? It is forbidden except to save life, and then I would take wounds to avoid it. Why are you here, so far from your own lands? She asked. Why did you come to us? You could have remained in the rocks, and we would never have known you were there. The Aiel hesitated, and she added, Tell only what you are willing to say. I do not know what your wise ones do, but I'll not harm you or try to force you. So the wise ones say, Urien said dryly, yet even a clan chief must have a strong belly to avoid doing as they want. He seemed to be picking his words carefully. I search for, someone, a man. His eye ran across Perrin, Mat, the Shienarans, dismissing them all. He who comes with the dawn. It is said there will be great signs and portents of his coming. I saw that you were from Shienar by your escort's armor, and you had the look of a wise one, so I thought you might have word of great events, the events that might herald him. A man? Verin's voice was soft, but her eyes were as sharp as daggers. What are these signs? Urien shook his head. It is said we will know them when we hear of them, as we will know him when we see him, for he will be marked. He will come from the west, beyond the spine of the world, but be of our blood. He will go to Rhuidean and lead us out of the threefold land. He took a spear in his right hand. Leather and metal creaked as soldiers reached for their swords, and Perrin realized he had taken hold of his axe again, but Verin waved them all to stillness with an irritated look. In the dirt, Urien scraped a circle with his spear point, then drew across it a sinuous line. It is said that under this sign he will conquer. Ingtar frowned at the symbol, no recognition on his face, but Mat muttered something coarsely under his breath, and Perrin felt his mouth go dry. The ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai. Verin scraped the marking away with her foot. I cannot tell you where he is, Urien, she said, and I have heard of no signs or portents to guide you to him. Then I will continue my search. It was not a question, yet Urien waited until she nodded before he eyed the Shienarans proudly, challengingly, then turned his back on them. He walked away smoothly and vanished into the rocks without looking back. Some of the soldiers began muttering. Uno said something about crazy bloody Aiel, and Masema growled that they should have left the Aiel for the ravens. We have wasted valuable time, Ingtar announced loudly. We will ride harder to make it up. Yes, Verin said, we must ride harder. Ingtar glanced at her, but the Aes Sedai was staring at the smudged ground where her foot had obliterated the symbol. Dismount, he ordered. Armor on the pack horses. We're inside Caerhien now. We do not want the Caerhienin thinking we have come to fight them. Be quick about it. Mat leaned close to Perrin. Do you? Yeah. Glost Mester Streckier of the time, with 4. Do you think he was talking about Rand? It's crazy, I know, but even Ingtar thinks he's Aiel. I don't know, Perrin said. Everything has been crazy since we got mixed up with Aes Sedai. Softly, as to herself, Verin spoke, still staring at the ground. It must be a part, and yet how? Does the wheel of time weave threads into the pattern of which we know nothing? Or does the Dark One touch the pattern again? Perrin felt a chill. Velin looked up at the soldiers removing their armor. "Hurry," she commanded with more snap than Ingtar and Uno combined. "We must hurry." Geofram Bornhald ignored the smell of burning houses and the bodies that lay sprawled on the dirt of the street. Baer and a white-cloaked guard of 100 rode into the village at his heels, half the men he had with him. His legion was too scattered for his liking, with questioners having too many of the commands, but his orders had been explicit: obey the questioners. There had been but slight resistance here. Only half a dozen dwellings gave off columns of smoke. The inn was still standing, he saw, white-plastered stone like almost every structure on Almoth Plain. Reining up before the inn, his eyes went past the prisoners his soldiers held near the village, well to the long gibbet marring the village green. It was hastily made, only a long pole on uprights, but it held 30 bodies, their clothes ruffled by the breeze. There were small bodies hanging among their elders. Even Baer stared at that in disbelief. "Muadj!" he roared. A grizzled man trotted away from those holding the prisoners. Muad had fallen into the hands of dark friends. Once, his scarred face took even the strongest aback. "Is this your work, Muad, or the Seanchan?" "Neither, my lord captain." Muad's voice was a hoarse, whispered growl, another leaving of the dark friends. He said no more. Bornhald frowned. "Surely that lot did not do it," he said, gesturing to the prisoners. The children did not look so neat as when he had brought them across Tarabon, but they seemed ready to parade compared with the rabble that crouched under their watchful eyes. Men in rags and bits of armor with sullen faces, remnants of the army Tarabon had sent against the invaders on Tommen Head. Muad hesitated, then said carefully, "The villagers say they wore Tarabona cloaks, my lord captain." There was a big man among them, with grey eyes and a long moustache that sounds twin to Child Erwin, and a young lad trying to hide a pretty face behind a yellow beard who fought with his left hand. "Sounds almost like Child 1, my lord captain." "Questioners," Bornhald spat. Erwin and Wern were among those he had had to hand over to the questioner's command. He had seen questioner tactics before, but this was the first time he had ever been faced with children's bodies. "If my lord captain says so," Muad made it sound like fervent agreement. "Cut them down," Bornhald said wearily. "Cut them down and make sure the villagers know there will be no more killing. Unless some fool decides to be brave because his woman is watching, and I have to make an example." He dismounted, eyeing the prisoners again, as Muad hurried off calling for ladders and knives. He had more to think about than questioners' overzealousness. He wished he could stop thinking about questioners altogether. "They do not put up much fight, my lord captain," Baer said, "either these Tarabonas or what is left of the Domani. They snap like cornered rats, but run as soon as anything snaps back. Let us see how we do against the invaders, Baer, before we look down on these men, yes?" The prisoners' faces bore a defeated look that had been there before his men came. "Have Muad pick one out for me." Muad's face was enough to soften most men's resolve by itself. An officer, preferably. One who looks intelligent enough to tell what he has seen without embroidery, but young enough not to have yet grown a full backbone. Tell Muad to be not too gentle about it, yes? Make the fellow believe that I mean to see worse happen to him than he ever dreamed of, unless he convinces me otherwise. He tossed his reins to one of the children and strode into the inn. The innkeeper was there, for a wonder, an obsequious, sweating man, his dirty shirt straining over his belly until the embroidered red scrollwork seemed ready to pop off. Bornhald waved the man away. He was vaguely aware of a woman and some children huddling in a doorway until the fat innkeeper shepherded them out. Bornhald pulled off his gauntlets and sat at one of the tables. He knew too little about the invaders, the strangers. That was what almost everyone called them, those who did not just babble about Arthur Hawkwing. He knew they called themselves the Seanchan and Haleen. He had enough of the old tongue to know the latter meant those who come before, or the forerunners. They also called themselves Rhuidean, those who come home, and spoke of Perrin, the return. It was almost enough to make him believe the tales of Arthur Hawkwing's armies come back. No one knew where the Seanchan had come from, other than that they had landed in ships. Bornhald's requests for information from the seafolk had been met with silence. Amador did not hold the Atha'an Mir in good favor, and the attitude was returned with interest. All he knew of the Seanchan he had heard from men like those outside. Broken, beaten rabble who spoke, wide-eyed and sweating, of men who came into battle riding monsters as often as horses, who fought with monsters by their sides, and brought Aes Sedai to rend the earth under their enemies' feet. A sound of boots in the doorway made him put on a wolfish grin, but Baer was not accompanied by Muad. The Child of the Light, who stood beside him, back-braced and helmet in the crook of his arm, was Gerald, who Bornhald expected to be 100 miles away. Over his armor, the young man wore a cloak of damane cut, trimmed with blue, not the white cloak of the children. "Muad is talking to a young fellow now, my Lord Captain," Baer said. "Child Gerald has just ridden in with a message." Bornhald waved for Gerald to begin. The young man did not unbend. "The compliments of Jaichim Caradin," he started, looking straight ahead, "who guides the hand of the light in." "I have no need of the questioner's compliments," Bornhald growled, and saw the young man's startled look. Gerald was young yet. For that matter, Baer looked uncomfortable as well. "You will give me his message, yes?" "Not word for word, unless I ask it. Simply tell me what he wants." The child, set to recite, swallowed before he began. "My Lord Captain, he says you are moving too many men too close to Domon Head. He says the dark friends on Almoth Plain must be rooted out, and you are, forgive me, Lord Captain, you are to turn back at once and ride toward the heart of the plain." He stood stiffly, waiting. Bornhald studied him. The dust of the plain stained Gerald's face, as well as his cloak and his boots. "Go and get yourself something to eat," Bornhald told him. "There should be wash water in one of these houses if you wish it. Return to me in an hour. I will have messages for you to carry." He waved the young man out. "The questioners may be right, my Lord Captain," Baer said when Gerald was gone. "There are many villages scattered on the plain, and the Dark Friends." Bornhald's hand, slapping the table, cut him off. "What Dark Friends? What Dark Friends? I have seen nothing in any village he has ordered taken, except farmers and craftsmen worried that we will burn their livelihoods, and a few old women who tend the sick." Baer's face was a study in lack of expression. He was always readier than Bornhald to see Dark Friends. "And children, Baer? Do children here become Dark Friends?" "The sins of the mother are visited to the 5th generation," Baer quoted, "and the sins of the father to the 10th. But he looked uneasy. Even Baer had never killed a child. "Has it never occurred to you, Baer, to wonder why Caradin has taken away our banners and the cloaks of the men the questioners lead? Even the questioners themselves have put off the white. This suggests something, yes?" "He must have his reasons, Lord Captain," Baer said slowly. "The questioners always have reasons, even when they do not tell the rest of us." Bornhald reminded himself that Baer was a good soldier. Children to the north wear Tarabona cloaks, Baer, and those to the south, damane. "I do not like what this suggests to me. There are Dark Friends here, but they are in Falme, not on the plain. When Gerald rides, he will not ride alone. Messages will go to every group of the children I know how to find. I mean to take the Legion onto Domon Head, Baer, and see what the true Dark Friends, these Seanchan, are up to." Baer looked troubled, but before he could speak, Muad appeared with one of the prisoners. The sweating young man in a battered, ornate breastplate shot frightened looks at Muad's hideous face. Bornhald drew his dagger and began trimming his nails. He had never understood why that made some men nervous, but he used it just the same. Even his grandfatherly smile made the prisoner's dirty face pale. "Now, young man, you will tell me everything you know about these strangers, yes? If you need to think on what to say, I will send you back out with Child Muad to consider it." The prisoner darted a wide-eyed look at Muad. Then words began to pour out of him. The long swells of the Arith Ocean made spray roll, but Domon's spread feet balanced him as he held the long tube of the looking-glass to his eye and studied the large vessel that pursued and was slowly overtaking. The wind where spray ran was not the best or the strongest, but where the other ship smashed the swells into mountains of foam with its bluff bow, it could not have blown better. The coastline of Domon Head loomed to the east, dark cliffs and narrow strips of sand. He had not cared to take spray too far out, and now he feared he might pay for it. "Strangers, Captain?" Urien had the sound of sweat in his voice. "Is it a stranger ship?" Domon lowered the looking-glass, but his eye still seemed filled by that tall, square-looking ship with its odd ribbed sails. "Seanchan," he said, and heard Urien groan. He drummed his thick fingers on the rail, then told the helmsman, "Take her closer in. That ship will no dare enter the shallow waters spray can sail." Urien shouted commands, and crewmen ran to haul in booms as the helmsman put the tiller over, pointing the bow more toward the shoreline. Spray moved more slowly, heading so far into the wind, but Domon was sure he could reach shoal waters before the other vessel came up on him. Did her holds be full, she could still take shallower water than ever, that great hull can. His ship rode a little higher in the water than she had on sailing from Tanchico. A third of the cargo of fireworks he had taken on there was gone, sold in the fishing villages on Tommen Head, but with the silver that flowed, for the fireworks had come disturbing reports. The people spoke of visits from the tall, boxy ships of the invaders. When Seanchan ships anchored off the coast, the villagers who drew up to defend their homes were rent by lightning from the sky, while small boats were still ferrying the invaders ashore and the earth erupted in fire under their feet. Domon had thought he was hearing nonsense until he was shown the blackened ground, and he had seen it in too many villages to doubt any longer. Monsters fought beside the Seanchan soldiers. Not that there was ever much resistance left, the villagers said, and some even claimed that the Seanchan themselves were monsters, with heads like huge insects. In Tanchico, no one had even known what they called themselves, and the Taraboners spoke confidently of their soldiers driving the invaders into the sea. But in every coastal town it was different. The Seanchan told astonished people they must swear again, oaths they had forsaken, though never deigning to explain when they had forsaken them or what the oaths meant. The young women were taken away one by one to be examined, and some were carried aboard the ships and never seen again. A few older women had also vanished, some of the guides and healers. New mayors were chosen by the Seanchan, and new councils, and any who protested the disappearances of the women or having no voice in the choosing might be hung, or burst suddenly into flame, or be brushed aside like yapping dogs. There was no way of telling which it would be until it was too late. And when the people had been thoroughly cowed, when they had been made to kneel and swear, bewildered, to obey the forerunners, await the return, and serve those who come home with their lives, the Seanchan sailed away, and usually never returned. Falme, it was said, was the only town they held fast. In some of the villages they had left, men and women crept back toward their former lives, to the extent of talking about electing their councils again, but most eyed the sea nervously, and made pale-cheeked protests that they meant to hold to the oaths they had been made to swear, even if they did not understand them. Domon had no intention of meeting any Seanchan if he could avoid it. He was raising the glass to see what he could make out on the nearing Seanchan decks, when, with a roar, the surface of the sea broke into fountaining water and flame not 100 paces from his larboard side. Before he had even begun to gape, another column of flame split the sea on the other side, and as he was spinning to stare at that, another burst up ahead. The eruptions died as quickly as they were born, spray from them blown across the deck. Where they had been, the sea bubbled and steamed as if boiling. "We ID car, or, yeah, we'll reach shallow water before they can close with us," Yarin said slowly. He seemed to be trying not to look at the water roiling under clouds of mist. Domon shook his head. "Whatever they did, they can shatter us, even do I take her into the breakers." He shivered, thinking of the flame inside the fountains of water, and his holds full of fireworks. "Fortune prick me, we might no live to drown." He tugged at his beard and rubbed his bare upper lip, reluctant to give the order. The vessel and what it contained were all he had in the world. But finally he made himself speak. "Bring her into the wind, Yarin, and down sail. Quickly, man, quickly, before they do think we still try to escape." As crewmen ran to lower the triangular sails, Domon turned to watch the Seanchan ship approach. Spray lost headway and pitched in the swells. The other vessel stood taller above the water than Domon's ship, with wooden towers at bow and stern. Men were in the rigging, raising those strange sails, and armoured figures stood atop the towers. A longboat was put over the side and sped towards Spray under 10 oars. It carried armoured shapes, and Domon frowned in surprise. 2 women crouched in the stern. The longboat thumped against Spray's hull. The first to climb up was one of the armoured men, and Domon saw immediately why some of the villagers claimed the Seanchan themselves were monsters. The helmet looked very much like some monstrous insect's head, with thin red plumes like feelers. The wearer seemed to be peering out through mandibles. It was painted and gilded to increase the effect, and the rest of the man's armour was also worked with paint and gold. Overlapping plates in black and red, outlined with gold, covered his chest and ran down the outsides of his arms and the fronts of his thighs. Even the steel backs of his gauntlets were red and gold. Where he did not wear metal, his clothes were dark leather. The two-handed sword on his back with its curved blade was scabbarded and hilted in black and red leather. Then the armored figure removed his helmet, and Domon stared. He was a woman. Her dark hair was cut short, and her face was hard, but there was no mistaking it. He had never heard of such a thing, except among the Aiel, and Aiel were well known to be crazed. Just as disconcerting was the fact that her face did not look as different as he had expected of a Seanchan. Her eyes were blue, it was true, and her skin exceedingly fair, but he had seen both before. If this woman wore a dress, no one would look at her twice. He eyed her and revised his opinion. That cold stare and those hard cheeks would make her remarked anywhere. The other soldiers followed the woman onto the deck. Domon was relieved to see, when some of them removed their strange helmets, that they, at least, were men. Men with black eyes or brown, who could have gone unnoticed in Tanchico or Ilion. He had begun to have visions of armies of blue-eyed women with swords. Aes Sedai with swords, he thought, remembering the sea erupting. The Seanchan woman surveyed the ship arrogantly, then picked Domon out as captain. It had to be him or Urien by their clothes. The way Urien had his eyes closed and was muttering prayers under his breath, pointed to Domon and fixed him with a stare like a spike. "Are there any women among your crew or passengers?" She spoke with a soft slurring that made her hard to understand, but there was a snap in her voice that said she was used to getting answers. "Speak up, man, if you are the captain. If not, wake that other fool and tell him to speak." "I do be captain, my lady," Domon said cautiously. He had no idea how to address her, and he did not want to put a foot wrong. "I have no passengers, and there be no women in my crew." He thought of the girls and women who had been carried off, and, not for the first time, wondered what these folk wanted with them. The two women, dressed as women, were coming up from the longboat, one drawing the other. Domon blinked by a leash of silvery metal as she climbed aboard. The leash went from a bracelet worn by the first woman to a collar around the neck of the second. He could not tell whether it was woven or jointed. It seemed somehow to be both, but it was clearly of a piece with both bracelet and collar. The first woman gathered the leash in coils as the other came onto the deck. The collared woman wore plain dark grey and stood with her hands folded and her eyes on the planks under her feet. The other had red panels bearing forked silver lightning bolts on the breast of her blue dress and on the sides of her skirts, which ended short of the ankles of her boots. Domon eyed the women uneasily. "Speak slowly, man," the blue-eyed woman demanded in her slurred speech. She came across the deck to confront him, staring up at him, and in some way seeming taller and larger than he. "You are even harder to understand than the rest in this light forsaken land. And I make no claim to be of the blood. Not yet. After Perrin? Yeah. I am Captain Egeanin." Domon repeated himself, trying to speak slowly, and added, "I do be a peaceful trader, Captain. I mean no harm to you, and I have no part in your war." He could not help eyeing the two women connected by the leash again. "A peaceful trader," Egeanin mused. "In that case, you will be free to go once you have sworn fealty again." She noticed his glances and turned to smile at the women with the pride of ownership. "You admire my damane. She cost me dear, but she was worth every coin. Few but nobles own a damane, and most are property of the throne. She is strong, trader. She could have broken your ship to splinters, had I wished it so." Domon stared at the women and the silver leash. He had connected the one wearing the lightning with the fiery fountains in the sea, and assumed she was an Aes Sedai. Egeanin had just set his head whirling. No one could do that to. Yeah. "She is Aes Sedai?" he said disbelievingly. He never saw the casual backhand blow coming. He staggered as her steel-backed gauntlet split his lip. "That name is never spoken," Egeanin said with a dangerous softness. "There are only the damane, the leashed ones, and now they serve in truth as well as name." Her eyes made ice seem warm. Domon swallowed blood and kept his hand clenched at his sides. If he had had a sword to hand, he would not have led his crew to slaughter against a dozen armored soldiers, but it was an effort to make his voice humble. "I meant no disrespect, Captain. I know nothing of you or your ways. If I do offend, it is ignorance, no intention." She looked at him, then said, "You are all ignorant, Captain, but you will pay the debt of your forefathers. This land was ours, and it will be ours again. With the return, it will be ours again." Domon did not know what to say. Surely she can no mean that nattering about Arthur Hawkwing be true, so he kept his mouth shut. You will sail your vessel to Falme, he tried to protest, but her glare silenced him, where you and your ship will be examined. If you are no more than a peaceful trader, as you claim, you will be allowed to go your way when you have sworn the oaths. Oaths, Captain. What oaths? To obey, to await, and to serve. Your ancestors should have remembered. She gathered her people, except for a single man in plain armor, which marked him of low rank, as much as the depth of his bow, to Captain Egeanin, and their longboat pulled away toward the larger ship. The remaining Seanchan gave no orders, only sat cross-legged on the deck and began sharpening his sword while the crew put sail on and got under way. He seemed to have no fear of being alone, and Domon would have personally thrown overboard any crewman who raised a hand to him, for as spray made her way along the coast, the Seanchan ship followed, out in deeper water. There was a mile between the two vessels, but Domon knew there was no hope of escape, and he meant to deliver the man back to Captain Egeanin as safely as if he had been cradled in his mother's arms. It was a long passage to Falme, and Domon finally persuaded the Seanchan to talk a little. A dark-eyed man in his middle years, with an old scar above his eyes and another nicking his chin, his name was Caban, and he had nothing but contempt for anyone this side of the Arith Ocean. That gave Domon a moment's pause. Maybe they truly do be. Yeah. No, that do be madness. Caban's speech had the same slur as Egeanin's, but where hers was silk sliding across iron, his was leather rasping on rock, and mostly he wanted to talk about battles, drinking, and women he had known. Half the time, Domon was not certain if he was speaking of here and now, or of wherever he had come from. The man was certainly not forthcoming about anything Domon wanted to know. Once Domon asked about the damane. Caban reached up from where he sat in front of the helmsman and put the point of his sword to Domon's throat. Watch what your tongue touches, or you will lose it. That's the business of the blood, not your kind, or mine. He grinned while he said it, and as soon as he was done, he went back to sliding a stone along his heavy, curved blade. Domon touched the point of blood welling above his collar, and resolved not to ask that again at least. The closer the two vessels came to Falme, the more of the tall, square-looking Seanchan ships they passed, some under sail, but more anchored. Everyone was bluff-bowed and towered as big as anything Domon had ever seen, even among the sea folk. A few local craft he saw with their sharp bows and slanted sails darted across the green swells. The sight gave him confidence that Egeanin had spoken the truth about letting him go free. When spray came up on the headland where Falme stood, Domon gaped at the numbers of the Seanchan ships anchored off the harbour. He tried counting them and gave up at 100, less than halfway done. He had seen as many ships in one place before, in Urien and Ter and even Tanchico, but those vessels had included many smaller craft. Muttering glumly to himself, he took spray into the harbour, shepherded by her great Seanchan watchdog. Falme stood on a spit of land at the very tip of Tommen Head, with nothing further west of it except the Arith Ocean. High cliffs ran to the harbour mouth on both sides, and atop one of those, where every ship running into the harbour had to pass under them, stood the towers of the Watchers over the waves. A cage hung over the side of one of the towers, with a man sitting in it despondently, legs dangling through the bars. "Who is that?" Domon asked. Caban had finally given over sharpening his sword, after Domon had begun to wonder if he meant to shave with it. The Seanchan glanced up to where Domon pointed. "Oh, that is the first Watcher. Not the one who sat in the chair when we first came, of course. Every time he dies, they choose another, and we put him in the cage." "But why?" Domon demanded. Caban's grin showed too many teeth. They watched for the wrong thing and forgot when they should have been remembering. Domon tore his eyes away from the Seanchan. Spray slid down the last real sea swell and into the quieter waters of the harbour. "I do be a trader, and it is none of my business." Falme rose from stone docks up the slopes of the hollow that made the harbour. Domon could not decide whether the dark stone houses made up a goodly-sized town or a small city. Certainly he saw no building in it to rival the smallest palace in Urien. He guided Spray to a place at one of the docks and wondered, while the crew tied the ship fast, if the Seanchan might buy some of the fireworks in his hold. None of my business. To his surprise, Egeanin had herself rowed to the dock with her damane. There was another woman wearing the bracelet this time, with the red panels and forked lightning on her dress, but the damane was the same sad-faced woman who never looked up unless the other spoke to her. Egeanin had Domon and his crew herded off the ship to sit on the dock under the eyes of a pair of her soldiers. She seemed to think no more were needed, and Domon was not about to argue with her, while others searched spray under her direction. The damane was part of the search. Down the dock, a thing appeared. Domon could think of no other way to describe it. A hulking creature with a leathery grey-green hide and a beak of a mouth in a wedge-shaped head, and 3 eyes. It lumbered along beside a man whose armor bore 3 painted eyes, just like those of the creature. The local people, dockmen and sailors in roughly embroidered shirts and long vests to their knees, shied away as the pair passed, but no Seanchan gave them a second glance. The man with the beast seemed to be directing it with hand signals. Man and creature turned in among the buildings, leaving Domon staring and his crew muttering to themselves. The 2 Seanchan guards sneered at them silently. No, my business, Domon reminded himself. His business was his ship. The air had a familiar smell of salt water and pitch. He shifted uneasily on the stone, hot from the sun, and wondered what the Seanchan was searching for, what the damane was searching for. Wondered what that thing had been. Gulls cried, wheeling above the harbour. He thought of the sounds a caged man might make. It is no my business. Eventually Egeanin led the others back onto the dock. The Seanchan captain had something wrapped in a piece of yellow silk, Domon noted warily. Something small enough to carry in one hand, but which he held carefully in both. He got to his feet slowly for the soldiers' sake, though their eyes held the same contempt Caban's did. You see, Captain, I do be only a peaceful trader. Perhaps your people would care to buy some fireworks. Perhaps, trader. There was an air of suppressed excitement about her that made him uneasy, and her next words increased the feeling. You will come with me. She told 2 soldiers to come along, and one of them gave Domon a push to get him started. It was not a rough shove. Domon had seen farmers push a cow in the same way to make it move. Setting his teeth, he followed Egeanin. The cobblestone street climbed the slope, leaving the smell of the harbour behind. The slate-roofed houses grew larger and taller as the street climbed. Surprisingly, for a town held by invaders, the streets held more local people than Seanchan soldiers, and now and again a curtained palanquin was borne past by bare-chested men. The Falmen seemed to be going about their business as if the Seanchan were not there, or almost not there. When palanquin or soldier passed, both poor folk with only a curling line or 2 worked on their dirty clothes, and the richer, with shirts, vests and dresses covered from shoulder to waist in intricately embroidered patterns, bowed and remained bent until the Seanchan were gone. They did the same for Domon and his guard. Neither Egeanin nor her soldiers so much as glanced at them. Domon realized with a sudden shock that some of the local people they passed wore daggers at their belts, and in a few cases, swords. He was so surprised that he spoke without thinking. Some of them be on your side? Egeanin frowned over her shoulder at him, obviously puzzled. Without slowing, she looked at the people and nodded to herself. You mean the swords? They are our people now, trader. They have sworn the oaths. She stopped abruptly, pointing at a tall, heavy-shouldered man with a heavily embroidered vest and a sword swinging on a plain leather baldric. You! The man halted in mid-step, 1 foot in the air, and a frightened look suddenly on his face. It was a hard face, but he looked as if he wanted to run. Instead, he turned to her and bowed, hands on knees, eyes fixed on her boots. How may this one serve the captain? He asked in a tight voice. You are a merchant, Egeanin said. You have sworn the oaths? Yes, Captain. Yes. He did not take his eyes from her feet. What do you tell the people when you take your wagons inland? That they must obey the forerunners, Captain, await the return, and serve those who come home. And do you never think to use that sword against us? The man's hands went white-knuckled, gripping his knees, and there was suddenly sweat in his voice. I have sworn the oaths, Captain. I obey, await, and serve. You see, Egeanin said, turning to Domon, there is no reason to forbid them weapons. There must be trade, and merchants must protect themselves from bandits. We allow the people to come and go as they will, so long as they obey, await, and serve. Their forefathers broke their oaths, but these have learned better. She started back up the hill, and the soldiers pushed Domon after her. He looked back at the merchant. The man stayed bent as he was till Egeanin was 10 paces up the street. Then he straightened and hurried the other way, leaping down the sloping street. Egeanin and his guards did not look around either when a mounted Seanchan troop passed them climbing the street. The soldiers rode creatures that looked almost like cats the size of horses, but with lizard scales rippling bronze beneath their saddles. Clawed feet grasped the cobblestones. A three-eyed head turned to regard Domon as the troop climbed by. Aside from everything else, it seemed too, knowing for Domon's peace of mind. He stumbled and almost fell. All along the street, the Falmen were pressing themselves back against the fronts of the buildings, some closing their eyes. The Seanchan paid them no heed. Domon understood why the Seanchan could allow the people as much freedom as they did. He wondered if he would have had nerve enough to resist. Damane, monsters. He wondered if there was anything to stop the Seanchan from marching all the way to the spine of the world. No, my business, he reminded himself roughly, and considered whether there was any way to avoid the Seanchan in his future trading. They reached the top of the incline where the town gave way to hills. There was no town wall. Ahead were the inns that served merchants who traded inland, and wagon yards and stables. Here, the houses would have made respectable manors for the minor lords in Ilian. The largest of them had an honor guard of Seanchan soldiers out front, and a blue-edged banner bearing a golden, spread-winged hawk rippling above it. Egeanin surrendered her sword and dagger before taking Domon inside. Her two soldiers remained in the street. Domon began to sweat. He smelled a lord in this. It was never good to do business with a lord on the lord's own ground. In the front hall, Egeanin left Domon at the door and spoke to a servant. A local man, judging by the full sleeves of his shirt and the spirals embroidered across his chest, Domon believed he caught the words, High Lord. The servant hurried away, returning finally to lead them to what was surely the largest room in the house. Every stick of furniture had been cleared out of it, even the rugs, and the stone floor was polished to a bright gleam. Folding screens painted with strange birds hid walls and windows. Egeanin stopped just inside the room. When Domon tried to ask where they were and why, she silenced him with a savage glare and a wordless growl. She did not move, but she seemed on the point of bouncing on her toes. She held whatever it was she had taken from his ship as if it were precious. He tried to imagine what it could be. Suddenly a gong sounded softly, and the Seanchan woman dropped to her knees, setting the silk-wrapped something carefully beside her. At a look from her, Domon got down as well. Lords had strange ways, and he suspected Seanchan lords might have stranger ones than he knew. Two men appeared in the doorway at the far end of the room. One had the left side of his scalp shaved, his remaining pale golden hair braided and hanging down over his ear to his shoulder. His deep yellow robe was just long enough to let the toes of yellow slippers peek out when he walked. The other wore a blue silk robe, brocaded with birds and long enough to trail nearly a span on the floor behind him. His head was shaved bald, and his fingernails were at least an inch long. Those on the first two fingers of each hand lacquered blue. Domon's mouth dropped open. "You are in the presence of the High Lord Turak," the yellow-haired man intoned, "who leads those who come before and succors the return." Egeanin prostrated herself with her hands at her sides. Domon imitated her with alacrity. Even the High Lords of Tyr would no demand this, he thought. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Egeanin kissing the floor. With a grimace, he decided there was a limit to imitation. They can no see whether I do or no anyway. Egeanin suddenly stood. He started to rise as well, and made it as far as one knee before a growl in her throat, and a scandalized look on the face of the man with the braid put him back down, face to the floor and muttering under his breath. "I would no do this for the King of Ilian and the Council of Nine together. Your name is Egeanin." It had to be the voice of the man in the blue robe. His slurring speech had a rhythm, almost like singing. "I was so named on my sword day, High Lord," she replied humbly. "This is a fine specimen, Egeanin. Quite rare. Do you wish a payment?" "That the High Lord is pleased is payment enough. I live to serve, High Lord. I will mention your name to the Empress, Egeanin. After the return, new names will be called to the blood. Show yourself fit, and you may shed the name Egeanin for a hire. The High Lord honors me. Yes, you may leave me." Domon could see nothing but her boots backing out of the room, pausing at intervals for bows. The door closed behind her. There was a long silence. He was watching sweat from his forehead drip onto the floor when Turak spoke again. "You may rise, trader." Domon got to his feet and saw what Turak held in his long-nailed fingers. The cuendillar disc shaped into the ancient seal of the Aes Sedai. Remembering Egeanin's reaction when he mentioned Aes Sedai, Domon began to sweat in earnest. There was no animosity in the High Lord's dark eyes, only a slight curiosity, but Domon did not trust lords. "Do you know what this is, trader?" "No, High Lord." Domon's reply was as steady as a rock. No trader lasted long who could not lie with a straight face and an easy voice. "And yet you kept it in a secret place." "I do collect old things, High Lord, from times past." "There do be those who would steal such. Did they lay easy to hand?" Turak regarded the black and white disc for a moment. "This is cuendillar, trader. Do you know that name? And older than you perhaps know? Come with me." Domon followed the man cautiously, feeling a little more sure of himself. With any lord of the lands he knew, if guards were going to be summoned, they already would have been. But the little he had seen of Seanchan told him they did not do things as other men did. He schooled his face to stillness. He was led into another room. He thought the furniture here had to have been brought by Turak. It seemed to be made of curves, with no straight lines at all, and the wood was polished to bring out strange graining. There was one chair, on a silk carpet woven in birds and flowers, and one large cabinet made in a circle. Folding screens made new walls. The man with the braid opened the doors of the cabinet to reveal shelves holding an odd assortment of figurines, cups, bowls, vases, 50 different things, no two alike in size or shape. Domon's breath caught as Turak carefully set the disc beside its exact twin. "Cuendillar," Turak said. "That is what I collect, trader. Only the Empress herself has a finer collection." Domon's eyes almost popped out of his head. If everything on those shelves was truly cuendillar, it was enough to buy a kingdom, or at the least to found a great house. Even a king might beggar himself to buy so much of it, if he even knew where to find so much. He put on a smile. "High Lord, please accept this piece as a gift." He did not want to let it go, but that was better than angering this Seanchan. Maybe the Dark Friends will chase him now. "I do be but a simple trader. I want only to trade. Let me sail, and I do promise that." Turak's expression never changed, but the man with the braid cut Domon off with a snapped, unshaven dog. "You speak of giving the High Lord what Captain Egeanin has already given. You bargain as if the High Lord were a merchant. You will be flayed alive over 9 days, dog, and—" The barest motion of Turak's finger silenced him. "I cannot allow you to leave me, trader," the High Lord said. "In this shadowed land of oath-breakers, I find none who can converse with a man of sensibilities. But you are a collector. Perhaps your conversation will be interesting." He took the chair, lolling back in its curves to study Domon. Domon put on what he hoped was an ingratiating smile. "High Lord, I do be a simple trader, a simple man. I do no have the way of talking with great lords." The man with the braid glared at him, but Turak seemed not to hear. From behind one of the screens, a slim, pretty young woman appeared on quick feet to kneel beside the High Lord, offering a lacquered tray bearing a single cup, thin and handleless, of some steaming black liquid. Her dark, round face was vaguely reminiscent of the sea folk. Turak took the cup carefully in his long-nailed fingers, never looking at the young woman, and inhaled the fumes. Domon took one look at the girl and pulled his eyes away with a strangled gasp. Her white silk robe was embroidered with flowers, but so sheer he could see right through it, and there was nothing beneath but her own slimness. "The aroma of calf," Turak said, "is almost as enjoyable as the flavor. Now, trader, I have learned that cuendillar is even more rare here than in Seanchan. Tell me how a simple trader came to possess a piece." He sipped his calf and waited. Domon took a deep breath and set about trying to lie his way out of Falme. In the room shared by Urien and Loyal, Rand peered through the window at the ordered lines and terraces of Egeanin, the stone buildings and slate roofs. He could not see the Illuminator's chapter house, even if huge towers and great lords' houses had not been in the way. The city walls would have prevented it. The Illuminators were on everyone's tongues in the city, even now, days after the night when they had lofted only one night flower into the sky, and that early. A dozen different versions of the scandal were being told, discounting minor variations, but none close to the truth. Rand turned away. He hoped no one had been hurt in the fire, but the Illuminators had not so far admitted there had been a fire. They were a close-mouthed lot about what went on inside their chapter house. "I will take the next watch," he told Urien, "as soon as I come back. There is no need, my lord." Urien bowed as deeply as any Egeanin. "I can keep watch." "Truly, my lord need not trouble himself." Rand drew a deep breath and exchanged looks with Lowell. The Ogier only shrugged. The sniffer was growing more formal every day they remained in Egeanin. The Ogier simply commented that humans often acted oddly. "Urien," Rand said, "you used to call me Lord Rand, and you used not to bow every time I looked at you. I want him to unbend and call me Lord Rand again," he thought with amazement. "Lord Rand. Light, we have to get out of here before I start wanting him to bow. Will you please sit down? You make me tired looking at you." Urien stood with his back stiff, yet appeared ready to leap to perform any task Rand might request. He neither sat down nor relaxed now. "It wouldn't be proper, my lord. We have to show these Egeanin we know how to be every bit as proper as—" "Will you stop saying that?" Rand shouted. "As you wish, my lord." It was an effort for Rand not to sigh again. "Urien, I'm sorry. I should not have shouted at you." "It's your right, my lord," Urien said simply. "If I don't do the way you want, it's your right to shout." Rand stepped toward the sniffer with the intention of grabbing the man's collar and shaking him. A knock on the connecting door to Rand's room froze them all, but Rand was pleased to see that Urien did not wait to ask permission before picking up his sword. The heron-marked blade was at Rand's waist. Going out, he touched its hilt. He waited for Loyal to seat himself on his long bed, arranging his legs and the tails of his coat to further obscure the blanket-covered chest under the bed, then yanked open the door. The innkeeper stood there, rocking with eagerness and pushing his tray at Rand. 2 sealed parchments lay on the tray. "Forgive me, my lord," Quale said breathlessly. "I could not wait until you came down, and then you were not in your own room, and... Yeah. Forgive me, but... Yeah. He jiggled the tray. Rand snatched the invitations. There had been so many without looking at them, took the innkeeper's arm, and turned him toward the door to the hall. "Thank you, Master Quale, for taking the trouble. If you'll leave us alone now, please." Yeah. "But, my lord," Quale protested, "these are from—" "Thank you." Rand pushed the man into the hall and pulled the door shut firmly. He tossed the parchments onto the table. He hasn't done that before. "Loyal, do you think he was listening at the door before he knocked? You are starting to think like these Egeanin." The Ogier laughed, but his ears twitched thoughtfully, and he added, "Still, he is Egeanin, so he may well have been. I don't think we said anything he should not have heard." Rand tried to remember. None of them had mentioned the Horn of Valere, or Trollocs, or Dark Friends. When he found himself wondering what Quale could make of what they actually had said, he gave himself a shake. "This place is getting to you too," he muttered to himself. "My lord?" Urien had picked up the sealed parchments and was gazing wide-eyed at the seals. "My lord, these are from Lord Barthanes, High Seat of House Damodred, and from—" His voice dropped with awe. "The king." Rand waved them away. "They still go in the fire like the rest, unopened." "But, my lord," "Urien," Rand said patiently, "you and Loyal between you have explained this great game to me. If I go wherever it is they've invited me, the Egeanin will read something into it and think I'm part of somebody's plot. If I don't go, they'll read something into that. If I send back an answer, they will dig for meaning in it, and the same if I don't answer. And since half of Egeanin apparently spies on the other half, everybody knows what I do. I burned the first 2, and I will burn these just like all the others." One day there had been 12 in the pile he tossed into the common room fireplace, seals unbroken. Whatever they make of it, at least it's the same for everybody. I am not for anyone in Egeanin, and I am not against anyone. "I have tried to tell you," Loyal said. "I don't think it works that way. Whatever you do, Egeanin will see some sort of plot in it. At least, that is what Elder Haman always said." Urien held the sealed invitations out to Rand as if offering gold. "My lord, this one bears the personal seal of Galdrian. His personal seal, my lord. And this one, the personal seal of Lord Barthanes, who is next to the king himself in power. My lord, burn these, and you make enemies as powerful as you can find. Burning them's worked so far because the other houses are all waiting to see what you're up to, and thinking you must have powerful allies to risk insulting them. But Lord Barthanes and the king. Insult them and they'll act for sure." Rand scrubbed his hands through his hair. "What if I refuse them both?" "It won't work, my lord. Every last house has sent you an invitation now. If you decline these, well, for sure, at least one of the other houses will figure. If you're not allied with the king or Lord Barthanes, then they can answer your insult of burning their invitation. My lord, I hear the houses in Caerhien use killers now. A knife in the street, an arrow from a rooftop, poison slipped in your wine. You could accept them both, Loyal suggested. I know you don't want to, Rand, but it might even be fun. An evening at a lord's manor, or even at the royal palace. Rand, the Shienarans believed in you. Rand grimaced. He knew it had been chance that the Shienarans thought he was a lord, a chance likeness of names, a rumour among the servants, and Moiraine and the Amelin stirring it all. But Selene had believed it too. Maybe she'll be at one of these. Urien was shaking his head violently, though. Builder, you don't know Aes Sedai as well as you think you do. Not the way they play it in Caerhien, not now. With most houses, it wouldn't matter. Even when they're plotting against each other to the knife, they act like they aren't, out where everybody can see. But not these two. House Damodre held the throne until Laemon lost it, and they want it back. The king would crush them if they weren't nearly as powerful as he is. You can't find bitterer rivals than House Rhuidean and House Damodred. If my lord accepts both houses will know it as soon as he sends his answers, and they'll both think he's part of some plot by the other against them. They'll use the knife and the poison as quick as look at you. And I suppose, Rand growled, if I only accept one, the other will think I'm allied with that house. Urien nodded, and they will probably try to kill me to stop whatever I'm involved in. Urien nodded again. Then do you have any suggestion as to how I avoid any of them wanting to see me dead? Urien shook his head. I wish I'd never burned those first two. Yes, my lord. But it wouldn't have made much difference, I'm guessing. Whoever you accepted or rejected, these Caerhienin would see something in it. Rand held out his hand, and Urien laid the two folded parchments in it. The one was sealed, not with the tree and crown of House Damodred, but with Barthanes' charging boar. The other bore Goldrian's stag. Personal seals. Apparently he had managed to rouse interest in the highest quarters by doing nothing at all. These people are crazy, he said, trying to think of a way out of this. Yes, my lord. I will let them see me in the common room with these, he said slowly. Whatever was seen in the common room at midday was known in 10 houses before nightfall, and in all of them by daybreak next. I won't break the seals. That way they will know I have not answered either one yet. As long as they are waiting to see which way I jump, maybe I can earn a few more days. Ingtar has to come soon. He has to. Now that is thinking like a Caerhienin, my lord, Urien said, grinning. Rand gave him a sour look, then stuffed the parchments into his pocket on top of Selene's letters. Let's go, Loyal. Maybe Ingtar has arrived. When he and Loyal reached the common room, no man and woman in it looked at Rand. Qualia was polishing a silver tray as if his life depended on its gleam. The serving girls hurried between the tables as if Rand and the Ogier did not exist. Every last person at the tables stared into his or her mug as if the secrets of power lay in wine or ale. Not one of them said a word. After a moment, he pulled the 2 invitations from his pocket and studied the seals, then stuck them back. Qualia gave a little jump as Rand started for the door. Before it closed behind him, he heard conversations spring up again. Rand strode down the street so fast that Loyal did not have to shorten his stride to stay beside him. We have to find a way out of the city, Loyal. This trick with the invitations can't work more than 2 or 3 days. If Ingtar doesn't come by then, we must leave anyway. Agreed, Loyal said. But how? Loyal began ticking off points on his thick fingers. Fain is out there, or there would not have been Trollocs in the foregate. If we ride out, they will be on us as soon as we are out of sight of the city. If we travel with a merchant train, they'll certainly attack it. No merchant would have more than 5 or 6 guards, and they would probably run as soon as they saw a Trolloc. If only we knew how many Trollocs Fain has, and how many dark friends. You have cut his numbers down. He did not mention the Trolloc he had killed, but from his frown, his long eyebrows hanging down onto his cheeks, he was thinking of it. It doesn't matter how many he has, Rand said. 10 are as bad as 100. If 10 Trollocs attack us, I don't think we'll get away again. He avoided thinking of the way he might, just might, deal with 10 Trollocs. It had not worked when he tried to help Loyal after all. I do not think we could either. I don't think we have money to take passage very far, but even so, if we tried to reach the Foregate docks, well, Fain must have dark friends watching. If he thought we were taking ship, I don't believe he would care who saw the Trollocs. Even if we fought free of them somehow, we would have to explain ourselves to the city guards, and they would certainly not believe we cannot open the chest, so we are not letting any Egeanin see that chest, Loyal. The Ogier nodded. And the city docks are no good either. The city docks were reserved for the grain barges and the pleasure craft of the lords and ladies. No one came to them without permission. One could look down on them from the wall, but it was a drop that would break even Loyal's neck. Loyal wiggled his thumb as if trying to think of a point for that, too. I suppose it is too bad we cannot reach Steading Sofu. Trollocs would never come into a steading. But I don't suppose they would let us get that far without attacking. Rand did not answer. They had reached the big guardhouse just inside the gate by which they had first entered Egeanin. Outside, the Foregate teemed and milled, and a pair of guards kept watch on them. Rand thought a man, dressed in what had once been good Shienaran clothes, ducked back into the crowd at the sight of him, but he could not be sure. There were too many people in clothes from too many lands, all of them hurrying. He went up the steps into the guardhouse, past breastplated guards on either side of the door. The large anteroom had hard wooden benches for people with business there, mainly folk waiting with a humble patience, wearing the plain, dark garments that marked the poorer commoners. There were a few foregaters among them, picked out by shabbiness and bright colours, no doubt hoping for permission to seek work inside the walls. Rand went straight to the long table in the back of the room. There was only one man seated behind it, not a soldier, with one green bar across his coat. A plump fellow whose skin looked too tight, he adjusted documents on the table and shifted the position of his inkwell twice before looking up at Rand and Loyal with a false smile. "How may I help you, my lord?" "The same way I hoped you could help me yesterday," Ram said with more patience than he felt, "and the day before, and the day before that." "Has Lord Ingtar come? Lord Ingtar, my lord?" Rand took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Lord Ingtar of House Shinoa, from Shienar. The same man I have asked after every day I've come here. No one of that name has entered the city, my lord. Are you certain? Don't you need to look at your lists, at least? My lord, the lists of foreigners who have come to Egeanin are exchanged among the guardhouses at sunrise and at sunset, and I examine them as soon as they come before me. No Shienaran lord has entered Egeanin in some time. And the Lady Selene. Before you ask again, I do not know her house. But I've given you her name, and I've described her to you 3 times. Isn't that enough?" The man spread his hands. "I am sorry, my lord. Not knowing her house makes it very difficult." He had a bland look on his face. Rand wondered whether he would tell even if he knew. A movement at one of the doors behind the desk caught Rand's eye, a man starting to step into the anteroom, then turning away hurriedly. "Perhaps Captain Kaldevwin can help me," Rand told the clerk. "Captain Kaldevwin, my lord. I just saw him behind you." "I'm sorry, my lord. If there was a Captain Kaldevwin in the guardhouse, I would know." Rand stared at him until Loyal touched his shoulder. "Rand, I think we might as well go." "Thank you for your help," Ram said in a tight voice. "I will return tomorrow. It is my pleasure to do what I may," the man said with his false smile. Rand stalked out of the guardhouse so fast that Loyal had to hurry to catch him up in the street. He was lying, you know, Loyal. He did not slow down, but rather hurried along as if he could burn away some of his frustration through physical exertion. Kaldevwin was there. He could be lying about all of it. Ingtar could already be here, looking for us. I'll bet he knows who Selene is too. Perhaps, Rand. Dees Deamar. Light. I'm tired of hearing about the great game. I don't want to play it. I do not want to be any part of it. Loyal walked beside him, saying nothing. "I know," Ram said at last. "They think I'm a lord, and in Egeanin, even outland lords are part of the game. I wish I'd never put on this coat. Moraine," he thought bitterly. "She's still causing me trouble." Almost immediately, though, if reluctantly, he admitted that she could hardly be blamed for this. There had always been some reason to pretend to be what he was not. First keeping Urion's spirits up, and then trying to impress Selene. After Selene, there had not seemed to be any way out of it. His steps slowed until he came to a halt. When Moraine let me go, I thought things would be simple again. Even chasing after the horn, even with everything, I thought it would be simple. Even with Sedin inside your head. Light, what I wouldn't give to have everything be simple again. Tavaren, Loyal began. I do not want to hear about that either. Rand started off again as fast as before. All I want is to give the dagger to Mat and the horn to Ingtar. Then what? Go mad? Die? If I die before I go mad, at least I won't hurt anybody else. But I don't want to die either. Lan can talk about sheathing the sword, but I'm a shepherd, not a warder. If I can just not touch it, he muttered. Maybe I can. Yeah. Owen almost made it. What, Rand? I didn't hear that. It was nothing, Rand said wearily. I wish Ingtar would get here. And Mat. And Perrin. They walked along in silence for a time, with Rand lost in thought. Tom's nephew had lasted almost 3 years by channeling only when he thought he had to. If Owen had managed to limit how often he channeled, it must be possible to not channel at all, no matter how seductive Sedin was. Rand, Loyal said, there's a fire up ahead. Rand got rid of his unwelcome thoughts and looked off into the city, frowning. A thick column of black smoke billowed up above the rooftops. He could not see what lay at the base of it, but he was too close to the inn. Dark friends, he said, staring at the smoke. Trollocs can't come inside the walls without being seen, but dark friends. Yeah. Urien. He broke into a run, Loyal easily keeping pace beside him. The closer they came, the more certain it was, until they rounded the last stone-terraced corner, and there was the defender of the dragon wall, smoke pouring out of its upper windows and flames breaking through the roof. A crowd had gathered in front of the inn. Quale, shouting and jumping about, was directing men carrying furnishings out into the street. A double line of men passed inside buckets filled with water from a well down the street and empty buckets back out. Most of the people only stood and watched. A new gout of flame burst through the slate roof, and they gave a loud, "Ah!" Rand pushed through the crowd to the innkeeper. "Where is Urien?" "Careful with that table," Quale shouted. "Do not scrape it." He looked at Rand and blinked. His face was smudged with smoke. "My lord." "Who? Your manservant?" "I do not remember seeing him, my lord." "No doubt he went out." "Do not drop those candlesticks, fool." "They are silver." Quale danced off to harangue the men lugging his belongings out of the inn. "Urien wouldn't have gone out," Loyal said. "He would not have left the—" Yeah. He looked around and left it unsaid. Some of the onlookers seemed to find an OGA as interesting as the fire. "I know," Rand said, and plunged into the inn. The common room hardly seemed as if the building were on fire. The double line of men stretched up the stairs, passing their buckets, and others scrambled to carry out what furniture was left. But there was no more smoke down here than if something had been burning the kitchen. As Rand pressed upstairs, it began to thicken. Coughing, he ran up the steps. The lines stopped short of the second landing, men halfway up the stairs hurling their water up into a smoke-filled hallway. Flames licking up the walls flickered red through the black smoke. One of the men grabbed Rand's arm. "You cannot go up there, my lord. It is all lost above here. Ogier, speak to him." It was the first Rand realized that Loyal had followed him. "Go back, Loyal. I'll bring him out. You cannot carry Urien and the chest both, Rand." The OGA shrugged. "Besides, I won't leave my books to burn." "Then keep low." Under the smoke, Rand dropped to his hands and knees on the stairs and scrambled up the rest of the way. There was cleaner air down near the floor, still smoky enough to make him cough, but he could breathe it. Yet even the air seemed blistering hot. He could not get enough of it through his nose. He breathed through his mouth and felt his tongue drying. Some of the water the men threw landed on him, soaking him to the skin. The coolness was only a momentary relief. The heat came right back. He crawled on determinedly, aware of Loyal behind him only from the Ogier's coughing. One wall of the hallway was almost solid flame, and the floor near it had already begun to add thin tendrils to the cloud that hung over his head. He was glad he could not see what lay above the smoke. Ominous crackling told enough. The door to Urien's room had not caught yet, but it was hot enough that he had to try twice before he could manage to push it open. The first thing to meet his eye was Urien, sprawled on the floor. Rand crawled to the sniffer and lifted him up. There was a lump on the side of his head the size of a plum. Urien opened unfocused eyes. "Lord Rand?" he murmured faintly. "Or what to unmur?" Yeah. Knock at the door. Yeah. Thought it was more envy. Yeah. His eyes rolled back in his head. Rand felt for a heartbeat and sagged with relief when he found it. Rand. Yeah. Loyal coughed. He was beside his bed, with the covers thrown up to reveal the bare boards underneath. The chest was gone. Above the smoke, the ceiling creaked, and flaming pieces of wood fell to the floor. Rand said, "Get your books. I will take Urien. Hurry." He started to drape the limp sniffer over his shoulders, but Loyal took Urien from him. "The books will have to burn, Rand. You can't carry him and crawl, and if you stand up, you will never reach the stairs." The OJ pulled Urien up onto his broad back, arms and legs hanging to either side. The ceiling gave a loud crack. "We must hurry, Rand. Go, Loyal. Go, and I'll follow." The OJ crawled into the hall with his burden, and Rand started after him. Then he stopped, staring back at the connecting door to his room. The banner was still in there, the banner of the dragon. "Let it burn," he thought, and an answering thought came, as if he had heard Moiraine say it. "Your life may depend on it. She's still trying to use me. Your life may depend on it." Aes Sedai never lie. With a groan he rolled across the floor and kicked open the door to his room. The other room was a mass of flame. The bed was a bonfire. Red runners already crossed the floor. There would be no crawling across that. Getting to his feet, he ran crouching into the room, flinching from the heat, coughing, choking. Steam rose from his damp coat. One side of the wardrobe was already burning. He snatched open the door. His saddlebags lay inside, still protected from the fire, one side bulging with the banner of Leashed Therin Telemon, the wooden fruit case beside them. For an instant he hesitated. I could still let it burn. The ceiling above him groaned. He grabbed saddlebags and flute case and threw himself back through the door, landing on his knees as burning timbers crashed where he had stood. Dragging his burden, he crawled into the hall. The floor shook with more falling beams. The men with the buckets were gone when he reached the stairs. He all but slid down the steps to the next landing, scrambled to his feet, and ran through the now empty building into the street. The onlookers stared at him with his face blackened and his coat covered with smut, but he staggered to where Loyal had propped Urien against the wall of a house across the street. A woman from the crowd was wiping Urien's face with a cloth, but his eyes were still closed, and his breath came in heaves. "Is there a wisdom nearby?" Ram demanded. "He needs help." The woman looked at him blankly, and he tried to remember the other names he had heard people call the women who would be wisdoms in the two rivers. A wise woman? A woman you call mother somebody? A woman who knows herbs and healing? "I am a reader, if that is what you mean," the woman said, "but all I know to do for this one is to make him comfortable. Something is broken inside his head, I fear." "Rand, it is you!" Rand stared. It was Matt, leading his horse through the crowd, with his bow strung across his back. A Matt whose face was pale and drawn, but still Matt, and grinning, if weakly. And behind him came Perrin, his yellow eyes shining in the fire and earning as many looks as the blaze. And Ingtar, dismounting in a high-collared coat instead of armor, but still with his sword hilt sticking up over his shoulder. Rand felt a shiver run through him. "It's too late," he told them. "You came too late." And he sat down in the street and began to laugh.